Welcome, reanimated fans. I'm here as always with my intrepid co host, Stuart. Hello, Stuart.
Hello.
And joining us for his guest appearances, cameo appearances, which we're psyched to have him here to talk about Last of Us Season 2, is Kyle Diaz. Hi, Kyle.
Good morning.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about the season finale of Last of Us Season 2. But before we get to that, we actually have quite a few news items, some of which we will talk about now but never discuss again. But first off is that we have a film coming out called Mirror Life, which is it Mirror Life Modern Zombies? Is that the whole title,
It's
Stuart?
got a colon in it, so you kind of
Oh.
have to say the whole thing.
Anyway, that's coming out. It's just a video on demand in the fall of 2025. So what did you think watching this? Because I had a couple of thoughts.
It looks like it's going to be, well, it is basically a mockumentary about one woman's search for her brother. I think it has what looks like some good performances from the cast based on the trailer. The trailer was a little bit lengthy. And then it does seem to have a novel approach to the genre. It's also it's a volunteer for a trial medication plot line, which is always fun. People get up to all kinds of shenanigans in those stories. So I'm kind of half interested. There are also some parts of this trailer because they do show too much that they kind of show their ass a little bit, and it's like, oh, that's what's coming out of that Humvee. Okay.
Yeah, I felt like they're especially sometimes like with video on demand, they're trying to get people interested, but I think in this case they almost went too far. I feel like mystery might have been a little bit better. Withholding some of this might have been a little bit better, but I thought it's probably worth a perusal. So we'll put a placeholder in this and maybe check it out. I don't know. What did you think, Kyle?
I guess it is kind of a mockumentary. Like it feels oddly throwback these days. Like it's kind of like, this kind of found footage or like characters talking directly to the camera, like documentary style thing was really big, 10 or 15 years ago. And I was kind of like, oh, this feels nostalgic in a way for some reason because I feel like it's a genre that kind of like crested and ebbed. So I'm probably not going to see this. All, just full disclosure, but if it gets a lot of buzz, then maybe I'll check it out. But
I
it
mean,
looks fairly forgettable to me.
you're not a glutton for punishment like we are, obviously. And then, as I was hinting at, there's this, it's in the theaters now. It's been in the theaters, I think, for a little bit, but there's a film out called Bring Her Back, which stars Sally Hawkins. And I really love this actor. I think she's been in, like, she's got a pretty, like, wide wide variety of things that she ends up being in. But for those listeners of the show who know my longstanding fear of possessed children, this seems to be really hitting that particular corner of my mind. So I don't know that I will see this, but it does look pretty scary to me. And she like at least the scenes that she is in. It's one of those things where she is mildly, if not fully, terrifying. So I'm going to avoid this, but putting it out there for anybody who might be interested in seeing this, and maybe I'll change my mind, but I feel like not. So, but it looks good.
This this director pairing, Danny and Michael Philippou, they did a movie called Talk to Me, which came out a year or two ago, which had all this buzz as being like, this is the scariest, most disturbing movie you'll ever see. And I watched it. I thought it was, you know, pretty frightening, but maybe I'm just jaded because I didn't find it to be like the most disturbing thing I'd ever seen in my life. But it was good and it had some very compelling and spooky imagery, and so I think they're probably going to do a fairly good job with this. A24, the film studio, has a reputation for kind of like elevated or highbrow horror, obviously with things like Hereditary and stuff like that. So it's certainly a lot of things about this piqued my interest. And it's getting some very good reviews and buzz. So I can handle for the most part Possession, so I'll probably check it out at some point.
Good luck, man. Good luck.
Um, but by the way, Talk to Me is something I also started to watch, and then I'm like, oh no, 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 I cannot do this. Conjured Spirits? No way. Not in my wheelhouse,
Yeah,
friend.
that one, given what you've described, is very much right down the line of the stuff that you would not enjoy.
Correct, correct. So, but I know other people are really into this kind of thing, so I'm not gonna, just putting it out there. So if people are interested, they can go and see it in the theater. Um, but speaking of things I will see in the theater, there's the 28 years later, there's been a lot coming out about how they've been filming it. And I did think some of the photos of these camera gigs were so cool. So this is because they shot this all with iPhones, but they also did like a lot of interesting things in terms of how they were filming this. So I thought that this was the stills of this were interesting, and then in the article that it's like a petapixel article. There's also a behind the scenes like making of trailer. So that was kind of cool because it had a couple of clips of the actual gigs and the camera gigs in action. But I think it's going to be. I think there's going to be a lot of stress involved just based upon even what I saw in these little clips.
So
So.
you know a fair amount about photography by association. So what do you think this setup with the 20 phones set up in like a semicircle? What does that actually do for the shot that they're taking there? It looks like in that case they're walking this giant structure in front of a zombie who is going through the woods. So what does the 20 phones do for that?
So they're taking it from all these different angles so that then they can probably thread it together in whatever way they want.
You
And
can only ever look at it from one angle, right?
but I bet they're gonna, and I mean, this is a little bit from the behind the scenes, which you should watch, but they are basically trying to like probably tie it together in a way that is, and it's going to be probably pretty fast editing. And that's a little bit of what, based on, I mean, I have like, this is a very different and higher level of camera than obviously they use for 28 days later. So, but just even how they edited that, it was just like very fast edits. And I think it's going to be pretty stressful to watch this. But the question is it going to be too stressful to watch? And can you follow it? Is that discombobulation that you're going to feel watching it? Is that going to, like, it probably will raise the stress level of the audience, but I think they want to basically have every single angle so they have all the options. And then they'll go with that.
Okay, options are good. I'm really appreciating Danny Boyle and his director of photography. Forget his name, but I'm appreciating that they're taking this franchise to be like, we're gonna do something weird and different with the
I
way we
know.
shoot it. It's cool.
Well, they did do that with 28
That's
Days
what I'm
Later.
saying. Like now there's a through line, and I appreciate that they're
And and it wasn't necessarily, it has not aged as well as we've discussed.
yeah.
This, I mean, they even talked about the abilities of the iPhone now are just like so far advanced. So I think when people hear iPhone, they're like, oh, that's like a different, it's actually the cameras are not, they're pretty far advanced. So you can have things that look um and can, and they're versatile. So I think that the gig that they set up is gonna, it will be interesting to see how they splice all this together.
Yeah, the article mentions how they have one with 20 phones, then there's 10 and 8, and there's other approaches. So yeah, I'm June
I think
20th.
it's pretty amazing that Apple can continue to land these kind of stories in places. Like,
I know.
it's been about 10 years since the first movie was shot on an iPhone, and it's been done several times since then. And I'm just kind of like, how many times are they going to read this article? Like, you'll never believe they shot it on iPhone. It's like, I believe it. It's been done many times now. I think that they're going to use that rig to, they said they were going to use it to do kind of a poor man's bullet time. So it'll probably be where they're, in some moment of graphic violence, they're like hopping from camera to camera, Trinity style going
Hmm.
around somebody.
That was how the Matrix shots were set up, was in a circle, but it was the camera was moving physically around it, right? This way,
Yes.
I guess they can just cut from the footage that they have with each phone or
Yeah,
camera.
that's exactly the same way they did it in the Matrix.
Yeah. Well, I thought that they had one camera that they just like swiveled around on a gimbal or something.
No, for the Matrix, they did the same thing. They had like 40
Multiple
cameras.
cameras. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, neato. Can't wait to see it, even if it has been done. I might have seen a film shot on an iPhone and I had no idea. C'est la vie.
Well, I mean, this is one of the things, like you can do so much more in the space just because, although with these particular setups, I mean, they're pretty massive. So I don't know that that gives you as much versatility. I guess it just gives you more footage. I guess the other thing I was thinking, though, even when they were talking about it, is that does it give you too much almost? Because you're going to have to go through all of that. So maybe it's that there's
Hmm.
particular moments you're trying to pull out and you know that you have this thing that you want to present. But that's like so much data, so much film to be going through, or so many images to be going through. It's going to be interesting to see how they do it.
We don't have to wait too much longer. Nor do we have to wait too much longer to see the sci-fi
See,
original, sorry, sci-fi. No, I'm not. That's your thing. I'm not a sci-fi guy. Revival, which comes out June 12th. One of the headlines I keep saying is these aren't actual zombies, but I'm like, I don't know. I've seen the trailer. They look like zombies to me. They look like zombie adjacent anyway.
I think they're zombie adjacent, and I think they're examining. I mean, what I will say though, before anybody watches this longer trailer, they do give a lot of information away in a spoilery way that may be too spoilery. So I almost wish I hadn't watched it because now I know a little too much. But I think this is examining a lot more about what, people's reaction to grief and loss, and then what happens when that gets turned on its head because the person's back. So I always like hearing what directors are thinking. But this to me is more like, hey, we're trying to drum up interest because this is coming out. And this is I almost wish I didn't know what I know now. So just putting that out there, if anybody doesn't want to be spoiled, probably don't watch this trailer.
I briefly got excited because there's a Stephen King novel called Revival, and it's one of his like late career novels, which vary a lot in terms of how scary they are because he like some are almost kind of like fairy tales, some are like historical novels like 11 whatever 63. Um, but Revival is one that he wrote like 10 years ago or so, where it is just the bleakest, scariest, like hopeless story like you've ever heard. It is so grim, and I kind of love it, but it also kind of like, um, really has stuck with me. And so I got briefly excited that this was an adaptation of it, but it is not. It is just another thing that shares the same name. So
Is this the one with the electricity thing?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I couldn't finish it because it was so bleak. So okay. Mm.
Sorry, that was off topic, but
No,
it
no,
occurred to me.
that's yeah. So, but yeah, this is not that. This is something else. So, um, maybe a little bit. Does it feel a little bit more like The Leftovers? Maybe not quite that though. I think that's the vibe I was getting though.
Yeah, a
Um,
little bit handling the undead, maybe also.
yeah.
Not quite the same approach, but obviously it's on sci-fi. It can't be. It can't be. The only other piece of news that I think we're going to mention today is that Rapture, the Will Poulter film, set in the middle in medieval times in England, was bought by Shudder or picked up by Shudder and IFC to be released. Hope like they're shooting for 2026. We'll see. I think it's still very early days, but it's supposed to start filming this year in Hungary. And yeah, Rapture. That's one I think we're going to be looking forward to.
Yep. All right. So lots going on, but I think we are ready to talk about the season finale, or maybe we are not. I don't know. I'm
Can you
Uh,
be?
I
I'll
can
I'll
be
just
ready.
uh I'll just throw in one last piece of news before we dive in, which is that I ate some of the nightmare mushrooms that I shared with you the last time around, and they were pretty delicious.
Were they furry?
No, they were not furry. They grew shockingly fast. So I will say, that part of the show, not that much of an exaggeration. Like they went from being very small to extremely large within like a 24-hour period.
Did,
Jesus.
did you eat them while watching the finale?
No. I did not.
And how can we be sure we're talking to Kyle and not to the mushrooms right now?
Hmm.
If you hear me start to click, you'll know that it's finally got me.
Well, I'm glad that they were delicious.
Did you
That would be
say
quite
that?
the power move, though, to be eating it like, while watching the finale. Like, I'm so not scared of you. I'm
Yeah.
literally eating you right now.
I
Although
like
there's not a lot of fungus in this episode.
I know. I like that visual though, Kyle. So, all right. All right, so finale called Convergence. And I have some thoughts, but let's get into it.
This was directed by Nina Lopez Corrado, and then the same trio of writers as last episode, which is Neil and Hallie, who Neil Druckmann, Hallie Gross, who wrote the video game, and then Craig Mazin, who has written every episode this season. Uh, this is I'm not going to say what this is. This is Convergence. So we start back at the theater where we know that Dina and Jesse had retreated from the woods after she took an arrow to the knee. And there's some interesting exchanges going on in this scene. While he's trying to tend to her wound, she's not saying some things, but she's also saying some things.
Right.
Like those are the big takeaways from this scene, obviously.
I feel
Um,
like I appreciate her, care for her unborn child. I feel like in this particular instance, a little bit of alcohol would have been okay.
yeah, you can have a snip of whiskey when you're getting an
Yeah,
arrow pushed through your leg.
it's
I
also not great for babies to have their, parents have arrows in their legs. So
True. Also, that arrow looked pretty intense.
It's a beefy bolt. Like the head on that thing was, damn, I'm glad he pushed it through.
Yeah.
Also, it's gonna do so much damage no matter what. And I'm
Hmm.
glad that Jesse apparently knew where all the arteries were.
Yes. And I I don't know. I felt like this would be a there's a reason why obviously she's not saying outright, but it's so obvious that it seemed a little annoying to me that they just didn't have the conversation, but I guess then we wouldn't have the interaction between him and Ellie later. But
What
uh
is the reason that Dina's not telling him now?
um I think she doesn't want to deal with it and she's in a ton of pain with the
Yeah,
arrow and I don't know, like maybe it just feels like especially since he came out and helped them get out of that situation. Maybe it's just something she doesn't want to broach. And maybe she also has conflicted feelings. So it's complicated.
I'm sure that it's complicated. I just feel like this is medical information that could be handy to to know if you're in this situation on some level. Emotionally, obviously, it's complicated and maybe not the right thing to talk about. Uh, But obviously, Jesse pieces it all together and confronts Ellie about it later on in the episode. Ellie arrives shortly after this scene and goes directly to Dina. Poor Jesse. If you think about his journey, it's taken him days to find them. His ex-girlfriend immediately gets shot. He's just pushed an arrow through her leg, and then Ellie, who he is, I'm sure, not fond of at this moment, walks right past him to go to Dina, and then he honestly leaves them alone longer than I would have expected him to, because there's a scene of Dina against all odds pushing herself upright and tending to Ellie. This is a scene out of the video game where you get to see just the toll that their experiences have taken on Ellie's body. As a video game player, you're like, yeah, of course, I've died like 30 times. No doubt she's going to be completely trashed. She goes through a lot more trials and tribulations. But here you get to see that too. Like she's banged up. And
I
this
feel like
is
at some point in here, there's the Seattle Day 3 title card, and that just like it totally blew my mind. It was like a jump scare when I saw that. I was like, it's only day 3. Like there has really not been a lot of time for these characters to even like just sit down. Like I think that's probably what Jesse's doing in the other room. He's just like taking a breather, you
Yeah.
know.
And
He
he said
he's
it's taken
basically had
them
like 45 minutes since he was rescuing them from all the stalkers.
it's taken
Right.
him 2 days to find them at or to find the theater. So honestly, they've all been in Seattle about the same amount of time. Like he got there maybe a 12 to 24 hours after them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is not a lot of time. And we'll come back to that at the end of the episode. During this backwashing scene, um, Ellie kind of opens up about what had happened to Nora. At first, Dina's like, "Good, I'm glad you found her." And then Ellie, the cracks are showing in her facade, I think, here, where she's like, "Did she really deserve it?" And then she shares the real truth about what happened in Salt Lake City, as she has deduced. And you can see something fundamentally kind of change between them.
Yeah, because she knew this, and now that there's the full background that has been revealed, Dina's immediate reaction is like, we need to get out of here. And I mean, she's also now been through like a very traumatic event where she's, I think, fully focused on the fact that she almost died or could have died easily. And I also think seeing all that torture and violence in the way that they saw it probably made things come into focus a little bit more. And the risk does not feel like it is worth it, no matter what she said before. So I think that this, and you can see the shift between them immediately. Like their acting here is, and their interaction here is excellent. So
I
I,
was a little bit confused about why this information landed with such an impact for her. So Dina was with Joel when she got captured by Abby's crew back in episode 2. And obviously, based on that interaction, you can tell that they know Joel. Like they're initially not threatening till they hear his name, then they all kind of pick up their weapons and then they basically start beating the shit out of him. Like, and so I feel like if I were Dina, having witnessed all of this, my supposition would be, oh, this isn't just a random like group of wanderers who stopped by and killed somebody in a random act of violence and then left. They were very, very obviously looking for Joel, found him, killed him, and left. And so there must have been something in Joel's past that he did to provoke this response from them. And so I was kind of confused about why the revelation that Joel had killed Abby's father and all the rest of the Fireflies and all that kind of stuff prompted such a turnaround from her because I feel like she must have had most of the pieces to put this together already. So I'm glad that she wants to leave. I think that's a reasonable response. But I'm kind of like, if this is what it took to change your mind, then why were you even here in the first place? I had a tough time kind of processing how they were, that how they expected us to understand that shift.
I think there's a lot of factors that go into this. Not least of all is, well, Ellie does explain away like, oh, Joel had a lot of enemies. She doesn't give any further details than that. So part of, I think, Dina's reaction here is Ellie knew this the whole time. And it's a conversation that they've had. And so it's somebody was holding back information, basically. But then also all the things that have changed between them, like Dina finding out that she's pregnant, even though after she knew she was pregnant, still insisting to stay in Seattle until this information came to light,
Well,
suggests,
she also has a major wound.
yeah, she's a liability now. She can't help out with this mission. It's time to go. Also, with the arrival of Jesse and Tommy, who are here to get them and go home, I feel like now there's more impetus to just to leave. But I do think it's a big part of that change, that sea change between them is discovering that Ellie had more information and never shared it.
yeah, I think that's more that she knew this the whole time. And so I think now knowing the full picture, this feels like a different mission than maybe it did before.
Hmm.
And I do think her being injured and the immediate threat and the fact that she's she definitely wants to survive and she says she has to survive. I think that that has changed. And I think putting the actual details, they live in a world where people make these decisions and, for example, Joel had to kill Eugene because he was infected. And so maybe in Dina's mind it was something like that versus um, what this feels like, which is Abby might have a pretty good reason for feeling that type of vengeance versus something that he had to do and maybe he didn't have a choice about, or the choice was survival. So I think that it just puts more context on it for her, maybe. And again, I think it did feel like some trust was broken because Ellie did not share this with her before and easily could have.
Hmm.
So, you know, she was making a decision without the full story.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And with Dina's story about her revenge mission or like her killing of the raider who had killed her family and that being part of her justification for being there with Ellie, if the unspoken part of that story was that her family had killed that raider's parents or something first, like there was just a big chunk of that wasn't there. And so her clear-eyed justification becomes suddenly like, you know what? I'm not into this anymore. I want to go home.
I also think Ellie saying that it wasn't hard for her to do this to Nora also maybe flipped a switch too, because Dina's like, this isn't good for her and
Hmm.
this
Well,
isn't
she's
good for
so
us.
shell-shocked that she even says that. Like I don't believe that Ellie's okay,
Oh,
or
I
that
don't.
Ellie found it easy. I think that the way she's acting doesn't seem like a person who just had a good time torturing somebody.
Right. But I also think there's a concern about what's going to happen to Ellie if she continues down this path.
Yeah.
And it's not a very happy ending. And so I think that's a piece of this too. So.
If you think about this episode in terms of, even as a microcosm of the greater narrative, the story is about how people change and they change their minds. And so Dina's going right here based on this new information is doing a 180 and being like, peace out. It's time to go home. I'm not interested in this mission anymore. And as we're watching Ellie go through the acts that she has taken part in since they got to Seattle, she's definitely changing too as a character. And maybe we like her a little less. And that's part of the challenge of the way that they've chosen to tell this story. Um, big, big feels. The next day, we cut to the next day. Next scene is Jesse and Ellie prepping their bags, going to meet Tommy and Dina. Despite that, like cold shoulder she gave Ellie the night before, hobbles out and gives her a bracelet for good luck. This feels like a significant. I mean, she could just stay in her room thinking, and instead she actually goes through a fair amount of effort, especially with a big hole in her leg, to give this to Ellie, and it's fairly meaningful. But the more important part of this exchange is as soon as Jesse and Ellie go out into the streets, Jesse gives her a hard time for leaving her horse in that garage or wherever
I
it was
know.
that
I
she
was
left her.
so happy to have a mention of Shimmer, who I guess it has not been, like to my point just from a minute ago, it has not been as long hanging out in that music shop as I thought, but still,
But somebody cares about Shimmer
I'm
Of
glad
course,
she's
it's
okay.
Jesse. Of course, Jesse cares about Shimmer.
and calls Ellie out for not.
Yeah,
And he's like,
not that you asked. Yeah,
right. So I thought that that was pretty good. I
but
did like,
he's not talking about Shimmer for long because right after that he's like, also Dina's pregnant, right?
right, and Ellie's realization that he's just testing, because he didn't fully know. I think obviously he suspected, but he didn't fully know till she confirmed it, and she's even like, "Oh man, you didn't actually know."
I really like Bella Ramsey's performance here. It's a version of Ellie that kind of takes us out of the darkness a little bit because she's back to saying her feelings and her thoughts out loud.
Yep.
Because when she reacts to him saying she's pregnant, right? She's just like, damn, I don't. I should lie, but I'm not able to, or something. It feels very authentic.
Yeah. And also, I liked this scene because look, these two characters, these two people really do love each other and have a lot of respect for each other, even if they're frustrated with each other. And so this isn't this little like love triangle or these complicated relationships are not easy. And I do like that they make it complicated and that there's lots of different layers to this. And they aren't even getting into all of it, but there's definitely, I loved I loved Jesse's basic, like their discussion and how they disagree about what's happening. And Jesse honestly calling Ellie out for going and doing this and the whole feeling about Dina, and they're not even fully getting into everything, but it's a really fantastic scene, and I think certainly makes he if you think about how much screen time Jesse actually has in this entire like season, it's actually not much, but he makes it count.
Hmm. And some of that's down to writing as well as the performance by young Mazzino. But yeah, you know, he's the Leto Atreides of this show. Lovely, lovely, honorable person. He's the Tyrese. Um, okay. So then they're walking through the streets, the zombie-free streets of Seattle, which yeah, is kind of annoying, but uh, I guess they don't have time in this episode to tell a story that includes more zombies, but it is frustrating when you watch a zombie show and they don't have any zombies. Um, and they see a prophet mural that is a different looking person, and Ellie asks, "Are there more than one of them?" This is totally new to me. I don't know what this is about. So that's kind of curious. But then they're walking in very heavy rain, which I'm sure Kyle is like, "Yep, this checks out 100%." And then they run into a parking lot sort of area and witness an altercation between a patrol of wolves, including that one guy from the flashback with Isaac and like a teenager looking kid, wolf of Scar. And he basically gets dragged outside to be executed. Jesse holds Ellie back from intervening, basically saving both of their lives. But that's not important to Ellie. What's important to Ellie is that she witnessed the wrong being done and was not able to intervene.
I had a lot of problems with Ellie's reaction here. I did not understand where this was coming from based on both her long-term history as a character and her short-term history as a character. So, short-term first, in this scene, Ellie reacts really strongly and emotionally to the idea of the scar being executed. Like the one day ago, she saw those guys string somebody up and disembowel them and then shoot her friend in the leg with an arrow. Like, I just had a really tough time with her being like, oh, they're gonna kill this innocent kid. I'm like, you just watched them use that sickle. It seems like she should understand that there's plenty of brutality on both sides here. And then if we jump back to last season, you have a person who, they went through that ambush in Kansas City where, Joel had to kill the folks, and Ellie had her first, experience with almost killing somebody. You had the kidnapping by cannibals and getting held and possibly going to get eaten. Like, I just feel like she should be more jaded than she is here, and it kind of comes out of nowhere for me, this like, and then she really throws it back on Jesse, like, oh, I can't believe you didn't help these people. She watched Joel do this like time and time and time again, just not trust outsiders or people who aren't a part of their community. So I felt like this kind of was contrived and a little bit felt like a wrong note, or that it ignored some parts of her longer character history.
I also felt a little, I thought it was off-putting because of what they had just witnessed. in terms of that torture and the disemboweling in the woods. So I don't know, like, and yes, this is a younger kid, so maybe that's what tipped her off, where she was maybe identifying herself with that. But I also felt like it felt like it didn't make a ton of sense to me. But maybe it's because they all had weapons and he was so outmatched. And just seeing somebody helpless like that, but it didn't hit well, just in terms of this interaction with them, because I also thought this seems like I almost felt like she would have the same reaction that Jesse would, which is that these people are just both really terrifying, and I want to get away from them as quickly as possible and don't want to get involved in their conflict. So I don't know. Stuart, do you have any other thoughts on this? I
Yeah,
definitely felt like this was a weird sentiment for her to have after what they saw in the woods and after, her fleeing them, basically.
I agree with both of you. I think that this interaction is injected here to give her a reason to not go with Jesse later, where she will throw it in his face and be like, "Hey, I wanted to save everybody, and you stopped me," and community. So I think it's one of the rare writing flubs in this show where they
Oh,
couldn't.
we're gonna get to another one in a little bit.
I know, but they're still rare considering.
That's true. That's true.
Uh,
But there were a couple of them in this episode.
it's a tough episode to write, honestly. I feel for the writers in this one, although there were three of them. Uh, Trying to end a season at this point could not have been simple affair. So this interaction comes to a close, and we get a scene of Costco where the wolves have a base set up. And familiar face, Elise Park, goes to Isaac, where he is poring over maps, and says, this I'm sure Kyle resonated with you, that these storms are converging and will get even bigger.
At least they're acknowledging that it's weird.
Yeah, okay. I guess so. There is some acknowledgement there. But how do they know about the converging storms? Do they have meteorology all of a sudden? Maybe they do. Satellites and radars still operating?
So this just to check myself because I didn't actually go back and look to see if it's exactly the same person. This is the mom
Yeah. This is Elise
from the
Park.
hospital.
Yeah.
So Stuart, you were kind of poking some holes in my understanding of the timeline from a little while back. How long do you think it's been since she lost her son in the
Yeah.
hospital? That's
I
based
mean,
on
I
this scene.
think mutually we all poked holes in each other's understanding of the timeline because I could have sworn that was the same day, but now she seems very much over the death of her son in this scene.
That's that's kind of how I felt. I was like, this doesn't seem like a person who like just lost their child.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe she's just really compartmentalized, but her whole vibe here seems very different than the last time we saw her, which makes me think at least some time has passed.
And I don't know why it's not Hanrahan in this scene. Like she feels like more of a lieutenant to Isaac who would come and have this conversation with him, whereas Elise was answering to Hanrahan. So I don't know. I don't know why they chose. Yeah. So I don't know when the elevator, when Leon went down to the basement. I have no idea when that happened in the
Okay.
timeline anymore. Because there was no title card for that telling me when it
No, there
was.
wasn't.
I
Yeah.
just assumed it was the same time because otherwise, any other flashback we've had in this season has had some sort of information to tell us when it occurred.
Yeah, you assumed it was like the same day, and I assumed it was like 2 years prior. So like we're anywhere still in that zone, I
Yeah.
feel like.
Yeah. Although now that you have experience with mushrooms, maybe he did get all
They do
mushroomed
grow very
up.
fast.
It's an interesting exchange here too, because Isaac is not concerned about the storm or the attack. He just wants to know where's Abby, and Elise is like, "What are you in love with her? You sick old man?" And he explains, "No, it's because she's the chosen one." And Elise is just like, "Well, she's gone, so maybe she wasn't." I don't know.
This is interesting though because I don't think we haven't seen Abby, and I don't think we've even heard any of the WLF talk about Abby in a long time, um, or maybe at all this season. So it kind of feels like this is new information that she's AWOL, and not around for what seems like a pretty big offensive here.
I think you're right. Um, Apparently, I'd missed it, but there might have also been some radio chatter already in this episode about how they're going to go radio silent. I don't know if maybe it happens in this scene, but it's noticeable that even though Ellie is carrying around a radio for their mission, there's no more radio chatter. You recall that Dina was saying, "Oh, they never shut up." So there's some sort of big thing about to happen. Isaac talks in this scene about how they're both probably going to die, and that's why they need Abby to lead the future.
Right.
But I wasn't sure if this was in service of they know that there are these other entities who are not scars and are not wolves in Seattle because they've had a couple of interactions now. And so that's why they're not using the radios, but because they don't have to worry about the scars picking up a radio
Right.
generally.
I think it's definitely that they know that there's some other something happening in there because this has not ever been an issue with the scars, and they are very handily taking them out. Although there seems just to be a lot. It feels honestly to me also just a little bit weird that the scars are even a thing at this point, given how much firepower the wolves have and their tactics, and the scars just don't seem to be equipped to really resist this. All, that's it just feels like they wouldn't even be a thing, but I guess maybe they're good at hiding in the woods. But
Maybe.
I don't know, like they seem unduly like it does not feel like the match between these two factions is even at all. And so that was the one thing that just kept like just throughout every time we've been seeing them and what they're doing, like, okay, you can disembowel people, great, but these other people have firepower at a level that you don't. And, armor and all this other stuff. So I don't know. So that was the other thing that I don't fully believe the matchup here, and that maybe there's some other element we're not seeing here, but it doesn't feel like Isaac would be scared of the scars. So maybe there's something we're not aware of at this point.
Yeah, and I don't think we get that answer this season, so maybe we can expect it to come around next time. Um, we leave Isaac and go back to Ellie and Jesse, who enter the bookstore, which is where uh, Tommy and he were supposed to rendezvous this morning. It is empty, and they have another scene together. Uh, Ellie picks out a baby book, um, and Jesse's like, "Oh, good idea," but then talks to her about how he feels about Dina, which is not a love story. And he shares the story of how he felt like he was in love with one person one time and didn't follow through because of his responsibility to Jackson. This is a new interaction for the show. Not didn't happen in the game. Jesse doesn't get developed even this much in the game, although you do like him just as much. Strangely, maybe because of the mullet. Um, this justification of like I love Jackson so much that I'm not going to follow my heart to Mexico kind of flies in the face of what he's doing in Seattle right now to me. They have made him much more central to Jackson and Jackson more central in his life and in Tommy's life for this version of the story. So what they're doing chasing after Dina and Ellie is not for Jackson. Just I don't know. Like for him to be saying that in this scene where he is doing what he's doing, it was curious.
Yeah, there's a couple curious things here. First of all, I like his little backstory here and his little kind of tragic love story, and I like that he's trying to appeal to Ellie's sense of community, and he's looking to some extent. I think he's looking for a way to convince her to give up on this crazy quest that he's now understanding that she's quite committed to. Um, there's an element here, I think, that Ellie never truly felt like um a part of Jackson as a community. She only ever kind of half-heartedly participated in the kind of community obligations. She very much was viewed, I think, with distrust and viewed the community with distrust. And so I'm not surprised that she makes the choice here that she does to turn her back on Jackson, the community, but I am surprised that she makes the choice to turn her back on Tommy, the person, who's her last kind of connection to Joel. So I mean, this discussion escalates into a confrontation where she basically says, like, fuck the community, like I gotta do my thing, and and Jesse's saying, let's go rescue Tommy, and she says, no, I gotta go do what I need to do, and she leaves. And I don't they've been setting this up, but it's still hard to swallow that she would yeah, again, turning her back on Jackson, totally understand. Turning her back on Tommy specifically when he's in danger and could be killed, harder for me to accept. So I thought that was um, probably intentional, but also difficult.
I agree with that too. And even when she says that Joel was her community and that's why she's doing it, that decision to not help Tommy flies in the face of what she just said. So then, and maybe that's deliberate, so that we can kind of see her going down the path of vengeance. That what is happening to her is a little bit of what Dina probably feared when she heard the full story, that this is not rational and this is not like really exactly about what she's saying. And maybe she's acting out a lot of guilt and just feels like she can't basically, like, this is a wound that she can't close unless she does this, which honestly in effect is probably opening it even more and changing things about her in a way that is probably not ideal. And so I think the ambiguity, or that I think that contradiction is maybe deliberate so that you can see that she's not really thinking this through and she's not really being rational about that. Or maybe it's just that in her head, it's just her and Joel. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Either way, it's an excellent point. Tommy and Jesse must feel, if this gets related to Tommy, he must be like, damn, okay, thanks for coming for me, Jesse. I guess let's go save Ellie, which is where they end up reuniting. But we first have scenes of Ellie trying to get to the aquarium after she has seen it through her binoculars and pieced together the clues that she got from Nora. She finds a boat at the dock and almost completely overextends because she's like, there's just two guys down there. And then suddenly there's like hundreds of people there as the wolf naval assault rolls by and picks up more people and equipment at that dock before heading to this island. Kyle, what island are they going to, do you think?
No, 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 no. This is such a disaster logistically of a scene. I think it's also a disaster from a narrative and thematic perspective. This entire interlude, I actually think it's kind of like narratively insulting. It's so bad. This entire thing with the island and the scars.
I agree.
But even just logistically, it is so stupid in a way that it begs you to poke holes in it. So the only island they could be talking about is Bainbridge Island. Bainbridge Island is 5 miles from the Seattle downtown. It is a half an hour ferry ride. So the idea that she could be trying to cross Elliott Bay, which is the small bay in front of like the Seattle downtown, like where Pike's Place is, that she could be trying to cross that and get swept by a wave to Bainbridge Island it's inconceivable. It doesn't make a single lick of sense. The other thing is she finds a motorboat, which is like the most old-fashioned rickety boat. Like there are a lot of boats in Seattle and none of them look like that. All the boats in Seattle are owned by rich, rich people. Those are going to be some nice, speedboaty looking yacht style boats. Um, but that's kind of beside the point. But it, Puget Sound is cold. Like even in the middle of the summertime when the sun is out, people are wearing dry suits to go kayaking or boating on Puget Sound because the water is so cold. And so she gets in this motorboat, encounters just like a deluge, like a huge wave that flips her over, and with a backpack on in maybe 47-degree water, like like washes up on the shore of Bainbridge Island 5 miles away. Like it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever in such a way that even people who don't know the geography of Seattle, I think, would look at that and be like, this it doesn't make it this is dumb. Like this doesn't compute. And then the boat also either washes up perfectly right next to her, upright and empty of water, or it's a different boat that looks exactly the same that's just waiting for her on the sand there. Like it it just I have no idea what they were thinking with this little journey that she goes on. And that's before we even get into what happens actually on the island with the scars.
In anticipation of this whole conversation, because I was like, I'm gonna look up where this Ferris wheel is, the Great Wheel is. I'm gonna look up all the stuff, and I was like going to say to you, where on earth could she possibly be? But also from a narrative perspective, it just feels like this whole sequence doesn't make sense to me, and it was honestly like confusing. And why are we even doing this? So I just thought that it took away from. I mean, we have very little. Like we had very few episodes. It just felt like a very odd. It almost it felt like just an odd little side adventure that didn't make any sense to me. But especially geographically, it didn't make sense to me because I was like, I mean, it can't be the Blake Island Marine State Park. That doesn't make sense.
No, it can't be Blake. I mean, Blake Island's even further.
They're out. So
Uh,
I don't know.
Vashon's even further and way farther south. Bainbridge is the only one that makes sense, and it is so far away from Seattle.
I
And
mean,
they call it an island a bunch of times, so it's not like it's some part of some other part of Seattle. They specifically refer to it as an island.
right. And then the Harbor Island thing doesn't make sense from the direction she's going. Anyway, so I'm glad that you confirmed this, but I also, from the storytelling perspective, that to me, none of this made sense. And even what happens when she washes up on the island with the scars, like they're about to do their thing with her, and then they just leave her, which it would have been easy enough for them, and they've shown that they're not exactly like they're not really merciful. So to leave her to just sort of leave her to go. I don't know if it was supposed to just show all the fact that she's just not giving up in her vengeance, in her in her goal of vengeance that she almost dies and yet she's still going after Abby. Like I guess maybe that was the point, but Stuart, would love to hear your thoughts on this too.
This is another newly introduced sequence. This doesn't happen in the game. Ellie doesn't have a lot of interactions with the wolves that aren't murdering each other. But because they introduced this scene with the teenager and her indignance and her fight with Jesse, like, hearkening back to that and saying how she would have dealt with it differently. This is to contrast that, because of the tribalism, etc., that these people will kill her just because she doesn't look like them. That's what they're trying to do. I am agreeing with both of you, though, that it is not just geographically silly, like what giant wave is going to wash her out to sea. But cool. It's a yes, it's a bummer, but it's written in to make this point, but it doesn't do it. It does it in a clunky way, and I don't think that they would leave her alive. Think like, oh my gosh, our village is under attack by possibly by strangers, and here's a stranger. Let's let her go. Like it makes no sense. Uh, but now, this is one of these signals that she's supposed to be receiving from the universe to make her decisions, and her decision is, yep, better still go try to murder Abby instead
Yeah,
of make any other call.
it honestly feels like to me they were editing the final episode together and they're like, oh shucks, it's only like 37 minutes. Like what can what can we do here to bump this up a little? There's one part of this sequence that I liked, and to be fair, I did like it a lot, which is they string up Ellie and they bring this little kid out, and you think like, oh man, like how screwed up are these scars that they're letting the kid like witness this violence? But then no, the kid is actually the judge, jury, and executioner because he gives a little like disemboweling sign, and you're like, oh man, how screwed up are these people that they're letting little kids decide who to kill and who to leave alive? So that little twist I did like, but the whole rest of this sequence, like
Yeah.
she knows all the information that she gets here. She's already seen them disembowel somebody. She's already, seen evidence of their brutality. Like it's just redundant and
Yeah.
it and silly.
It's
So
it's unnecessary given, but it becomes necessary because they're trying to make this point that on one hand she's arguing with Jesse that she would try to save that young man, and now she is being treated the same way as the wolves were treating that Scar.
yeah.
So it's just for writery contrast, but it doesn't really help. But good news is she gets back in her boat, which had miraculously, I think in the behind the scenes, you see her struggling with the boat more in the water. And so maybe there was some version of the story where she like paddled it to the shore for 5 miles, which is why it's so close to her.
Oh, but it did not come across in this. It just
No, it looks like divine providence. So she motors her little boat, which by the way is a direct reference to the game. You go around in little boats like that through the streets of Seattle, which are underwater because of how much it rains there. Giant giant rain. And she gets to the aquarium where she goes in the roof and then tracks down Mel and Owen, who are having a conversation about Abby and Abby's whereabouts and how Owen is committing to go on a mission behind enemy lines. Mel is saying, let's not do that. It's just Abby. And Owen's like, I've got to go. I'll be back. And that's when Ellie walks in and is like, holds them at gunpoint. This scene is really tough. It's a tough scene, and the woman playing Mel does an incredible job with the way it goes because it goes very sideways. Any thoughts from either of you guys?
I think what struck me just about Nora's reaction and their reaction is how surprised they are to see her after they have followed Abby for so long on her story of vengeance that they all seem surprised that after having witnessed this that she might show up.
Hmm.
I don't know. That also struck me. It's like, well, that you've actually participated in this thing. You know what this world is about, and they're all like their sort of consistent theme is that Ellie should be grateful that she was left alive and that Joel deserved it. So I just found that to be interesting that they don't seem they do seem to feel justified in what they did and they fully expected her to just kind of go on with her life.
Yeah, they say like, oh my God, like they didn't also travel, 1,500 miles overland to find some random person and kill them.
And it's kind of ironic that they're like, "Oh, you wasted your life." I mean, that's more of a quote that Abby says later. I let you live and you wasted it. Joel could have said that to them too, right? He's like, "Hey, I didn't kill you guys in Salt Lake City." But they're happy to say that to Ellie.
I can see over the last episode or two, we've kind of started to understand how they're going to structure this season versus next season, where this season is mostly Ellie's story in Seattle, and then, as we'll get to at the end, next season is going to be mostly Abby's story in Seattle. But it's a tricky thing to do because all of the scenes that we're seeing here have the potential to be recontextualized later based on information that we get from the other side. And so if they were intermixing them, if like this season had been cutting back and forth, or like, one episode of Ellie, one episode of Abby, and so on and so forth, we'd have a lot more information than we do now. And so I, the death of these two characters of Owen and Mel is pretty well done here in affecting. You see Owen kind of try to go for the gun, which turns out to be a bad decision because Ellie shoots him and then also accidentally shoots Mel, and those characters both die, and Mel in a very, very, very tragic way. And but we haven't seen these characters since episode 2 where they were a party to some really heinous shit that we saw. And so I wonder if this scene loses some of the narrative impact that it should have because we don't have the context with these people that we will have after some stuff that we haven't seen yet. And so I'm just it's a really hard line to walk, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how well they pull it off based on next season's stuff, but there's more with these characters that we don't understand at this point.
Yeah. I think that is going to be the challenge next season is learning loss, or as you call it, when kids take the summer off from school and then they go back to school and they've forgotten how to do math. We are going to forget a lot of the Easter eggs, and I'm sure they'll show it to us in, you know, before on the Last of Us sort of scenery. But there's going to be a lot of stuff that they want us to remember how it went down when we watch it from another perspective.
Yeah, and from the moment that we meet these characters next season, we're gonna know that they're doomed. And so that also creates its own interesting tension that could work or could not work. I don't know, it's just interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, so the woman playing Mel is, oh, her name is Ariella Barrer. She had a couple seasons on Marvel's Runaways, which was a like the teenage Marvel D-list superhero show, which I rather enjoyed. She plays Gert, and she has a pet dinosaur. She's I didn't recognize her. I feel like the first time we met Mel outside of Jackson, and then here I was like, oh, that's her. I recognize her face. She does an incredible job of doing the scene of trying to talk Ellie through an emergency C-section. Obviously, it's not going to work.
She kind of says, I'll walk you through it, and then says nothing. So I was kind of like, I don't.
She said, I have 30 seconds before I die. Like there was no this was like a real just a punch from the writers to really I feel like this is Ellie finding one of her lowest moments, if not if maybe it can still go down from here, maybe it does in the final couple scenes of this show, but this is a really, really low moment for her where she's looking at the results of what she's been doing for the last 3 days.
Yep.
Yeah, and this scene is really hard to watch.
It is very hard to watch, but I also think it's much more realistic than her actually trying because this would have been, I just think that somebody in that situation is just not going to be able to do this. And um, I also think she's horrified that her actions, and even though she did not intend for this to happen, this is exactly what happened. And I think it's very hard to look at Mel and not see Dina. And she immediately kind of snaps out of what had been going on with her at this moment. And then, you know, is immediately, Jesse and Tommy show up and she's in shock. Absolutely in shock. And that I think it's it's such a contrast from what we've just been seeing through this entire episode. So
I did have a moment of thinking about, you know, what would happen if she was able to go through with the C-section, and the answer is like also really nothing good because, you have this probably premature
right?
newborn, no formula, no breast milk, like you're gonna have a very difficult time keeping this baby alive. So, um, you know, it, she's probably lucky that she was not able to actually go through with what she was being asked to do, but you know, it hurts her just the same.
Yeah, it sucks to do the math on this one. Uh, Luckily for everybody, they are immediately transported back to the theater, um, where we have, now so the four of them are reunited. We can see that Ellie's not doing so good. Dina goes to sleep. They're going to leave the next morning. They're talking about their plans to get out of town. Um, Tommy sees that Ellie and Jesse have some things that they need to say to each other, so he goes out to the lobby to pack the duffels. We have one final scene between Ellie and Jesse where they make peace basically, even though the last thing she said to him was horrible, and then left him to go save Tommy. And Tommy's remarkably forgiving, or slash never you know got mad at her about it. And he's like, yeah, I know you would burn the whole world down to come help me out if I was in trouble, but also admits like he didn't need to
But
be told to go get her. He was just like, yeah, I was gonna go do it because it's the right thing to do.
but doesn't wouldn't she not burn the world down to go get him? Like that's kind of,
But
she
she
just
says she would. She says she
but
would
she
have, but her actions don't certainly don't seem to
exactly like
suggest
she
that.
just abandoned Tommy when he was taking gunfire like
Yeah.
again like 2 hours ago
Yeah.
in Showtime. So all kind of all over the map here in terms of Ellie's motivations and decisions.
Yeah. Agree. It's a tough one. But then again, Ellie might not be the person we thought she was, you know? So they're having their like nice moment together when you hear some commotion from the lobby. They run out that door. This plays out just like it does in the game, which is heartbreaking. But as soon as the door opens, Jesse takes a bullet to the face. Abby or Ellie ducks behind cover, and you can see Jesse can see that his eyes are open, that he is bleeding onto the rug, and that he is fully dead.
Yep.
And out in the lobby, Abby has Tommy prisoner and is like, "Come out, or I'll kill this one too." And Ellie reveals herself. You can see from Caitlin Deaver's reaction that she's also surprised to see Ellie there. Uh, Ellie is pleading. Now she actually cares about Tommy's life, right? Like, please don't hurt him. I'm the one you want. It was my fault. Uh, and Abby says those words like, we let you live and you wasted it. And then there's a
Which I have to
gunshot.
say, banger of a line and extremely well delivered by Caitlin Deaver.
Yeah. You can tell that she's been going through some stuff too. Like she's got a big old bruise around her neck. She's looking a little worse for wear. But we cut to black as Ellie is screaming, "No, no, no." We've heard a gunshot. Who knows? Who knows what might have happened here? HA, any thoughts about the sequence other
Well,
than heartbreak?
wondering how she found them so quickly.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of questions I have there about that.
Yeah,
Uh,
and maybe they will probably be answered next season.
how she knew it was them, all of that. I think that needs to be answered. Um, again, I was very bothered by the surprise that all these characters have after witnessing what she witnessed, and after Abby, not even having seen her father died, went on this mission and would think that Ellie wouldn't after witnessing that. So that I have some disbelief about that. And I'll have to get over it, I suppose, but that is one part that just feels very unrealistic to me. But I guess if you're really thinking about it, it would be unrealistic that they would have left her alive knowing that. But that's the one part that just really was hard for me to like get on board with. And even her saying, "Oh, you wasted it." I don't know. It just wasn't to me. This is just doesn't make sense. But I guess maybe we'll have more revealed next season.
It's because Abby
We
really knows how to take advantage of being alive,
Hmm.
clearly.
we kind of breezed past Jesse's death, which had been strongly foreshadowed for most of the episode. But it is really tragic and shocking in how quick it is. You know, it's not some like heroic, like, oh, I'll sacrifice myself to help you. He's just confused, runs out the door, bang, gone. And I thought that was effective and brutal for a character that, you know, really exemplified the best of what humanity has to offer in this world.
Yeah.
Well, I also thought it was striking because he's the one who's taught Ellie so many things about, combat and all of this. And so it was so fast and it was so unbelievable and shocking. So I think shocking in the sense of how quick it was. But I but I think that the foreshadowing was so obvious throughout this entire thing, even throughout the season, that this was going to probably happen. And I kind of thought Dina would somehow be involved in this particular confrontation, but just given the relationship and maybe that would play out. But I think that this was definitely a significant moment. So the cliffhanger was really effective, and it sort of like happened so quickly after this scene with Jesse happened. So um, I do want to see more, but I also wished, in some ways, I wish more had happened in this episode. And every part of me was like, I wish they hadn't wasted that whole island thing. But this part of it.
Yeah. But we do get a closing scene of Abby waking up on Seattle day one in the sunlight in the stadium. Beautiful set that they recreated very nicely from the video game. This wolf base in a stadium with like crops on the playing field and bustling with people. And I think, we can obviously tell that that's where they're gonna start telling the story for the next season, as I've been probably talking about too much in the video game. You do get to play as her, and so it also raises the question of with Ellie's journey into darkness, what does Abby look like? Obviously we don't like her when it begins, or in episode as of episode 2, we think she's the villain. She is the villain. But we'll see. I guess what does season 2 hold for us and for Abby's story?
Yeah, I wonder whether season three will end at the same moment.
Hmm.
You know, it's like because we might spend season three just seeing the last few days from Abby's perspective, and then still end up at the same confrontation in the
It's kind of a bummer, honestly, to for the show to end here. I'm feeling a little bit down on it. Critically, I don't think it's doing as well as season 1 rather at this point. And I think that's just the nature of the story they're telling. It's a real bummer of a story.
It is a bummer, and I also think there's a purity to the story in season one that's easier to tell, where from the middle of episode one or something like that, there's a team and a goal. It's Joel, Ellie, and for a while some other characters who are trying to get her to Salt Lake City. Like, and that's all set up very early, and then everything else is just driving toward that. And so they have these little adventures and side quests and things along the way, but you kind of understand the whole time, who the characters are and what they're driving toward. And this is a more complicated story. There's more background, there's more characters that get brought in from outside of their little world. And I think in expanding the lens of the world like that and making the narrative more complicated, you lose a little bit of that kind of drive that the first season had. That I think there's, as we've talked about, there's stuff in this season that I think was really well done, and there's stuff that I liked a lot and watched a lot. I really didn't feel like they made any big serious missteps until this episode, which is unfortunate because it's the one where you want to kind of land the plane, and they did, but only kind of sort of, or maybe they clipped a wing or something on the way down.
I would agree. I think there was a lot in this season that I really loved. But this didn't land well with me, and I do understand though that in trying to set up the next season and trying to set up what they are trying to do, that that's a very difficult thing. But I do I of course will be watching the next season. But part of me just wished we had, and maybe that's why they're reserving it for the next season, but I really was hoping to see a lot more of Abby and a lot more of those interactions happening or some of that world. But I think we will have to wait for season three, which I think is not going to be for probably a while. So I think obviously it's been renewed, but I don't think they're going to start filming for a bit, and so we may not see this until like 2027 or so.
Gross.
So we may have a while. We may
Yeah.
have a while to go.
I really wish like a 7 episode season, and I know each of these episodes is like $10 million or something absurd. But why not just do a 14 episode season and tell both of these stories in season two, and then if they have more that they need to do one more. But yeah, I kind of
Yeah,
wish that they'd
I
done
think
that.
back to, Lost, for example, just to pick an example from the past. Lost was also tremendously expensive, huge cast, jungle setting, like all that kind of stuff. Lost did 22 episodes a season for 7 seasons. And
And so
we're
many
getting
of them were garbage.
yeah, 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 but we're getting seven here. Like,
Yeah.
from the expense perspective, I'm just kind of like this. I mean, I guess maybe this show can be that much more expensive than Lost, inflation adjusted and stuff. But we didn't. I guess we didn't realize how good we had it. I think you're definitely right that it feels to me like they could have easily done both. And I think that is there some writer strike stuff in this? Is that part of what threw this off? Like they're later getting this out than they wanted to because of that.
Yeah, they
I'm trying to
started
remember.
breaking this season, and then the writer's strike happened immediately.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I wonder whether they were like, oh, we can't wait until 2026 or something to release season two, so let's split it into two parts or something like that. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I actually not, when the way they were sort of playing this out, I actually did think that maybe they were doing things in a simultaneous way, and I was hoping for that until I then looked into some of it. And I think maybe there were some things that they had to overcome here, and now we're on this track and this delay because of it. But um, I I I don't mind a shorter episode arc if you can pack everything into it, and I think that that's a little bit more similar to some shows like in the UK. And I don't love long seasons if there's a lot of filler involved. So I do think there's a way to do this successfully, but I feel like there was a lot missing here, and it doesn't feel as complete as I think it could. So maybe we'll get more episodes in the next season, but I have a feeling it may still follow this trend.
Hmm. All right. Well, that was The Last of Us season two. Any other final parting thoughts? Moving right on. We watched it. It had more clickers as advertised than season one. Could it have had more? Yes. Yes, it could have fit in one or two more for sure. Um, knowing what I know about the video game plot, I'm still very excited for the telling of this story. I think that there's a lot of great storytelling that they can still plumb from the game. Having seen what
Oh,
they
that was
did with this final episode, I'm not super bullish on having Neil and Hallie be in the writer's room for every episode because I feel like they made some really questionable decisions in this one.
I thought that was interesting because I think from disgruntled fans earlier in the season, I feel like Craig Mazin was getting a lot of the criticism, much of it that I didn't agree with earlier in the season, but I felt like he was really kind of the focal point. And now I feel like it's undeniable that this was really a group effort on the hands of, Druckmann and Mazin and Hallie Gross and other writers in the writers' room. But Stuart, I was going to ask you like, how far did they get through the story of The Last of Us? Like, what percentage of that game narrative do you think has been shown so far?
Like in hours of gameplay, I don't know, but they're basically, yeah, I think they're gonna do, if they're gonna do it the way I think they're gonna do it, it's basically in 3 acts, and that was act one.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And I also wanted to see more of Jeffrey Wright. And I did like every bit of what we saw with Catherine O'Hara. And so maybe I hope they will return for the next season because I do think that they, as actors, but also as characters, were great additions. I think we didn't see enough of him, in my opinion.
Hmm.
So
That's true. Well, let's wrap it up right here. Next time on Reanimated, we're going to talk. I've already forgotten. What are we talking about?
Nosferatu.
Nosferatu, which will be so much fun, and AJ's really looking forward to it. So join us again next time on the podcast. You can, in the meantime, let us know your thoughts about the season finale, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. Look online for the rest of our episodes at reanimated.podbean.com. And I thank you all for listening.
Thanks so much. Bye.
See you.